Welcome back to the Game Collection. Shin Megami Tensei V is a super fun game and a perfect jumping in point for newcomers to the series. After all, I would know because it was my jumping in point for the series. But if you want to know more about why I feel that way, stick around, because I am SuperDerek, and this is everything you need to know about Shin Megami Tensei V.
Let's start with some context. Shin Megami Tensei is a series of Japanese-style RPGs with deep roots dating back to 1987, with the first game titled Digital Devil's Story, Megami Tensei. These were the original Monster Trainer JRPGs from long before Pokemon popularized the genre in the West. The first titles were all based on a popular series of novels by Aya Nishitani called Digital Devil's Story. Most Shin Megami Tensei fans either don't know or don't really care about these books or games though, because they're kind of a dead end of games that aren't canon to Atlus's currently developed titles. The Shin Megami Tensei series spun off from these original Megami Tensei titles during the transition to the Super Nintendo, with Shin meaning true. In the West, we wouldn't see anything from Shin Megami Tensei until 1995's release of Jack Bros on the Virtual Boy, which was itself a spin-off from the Shin Megami Tensei series. It wouldn't be until the 1996 release of the SMT spin-off Revelations Persona and its sequels that this series from Atlus would really start to gain traction in the West, despite Shin Megami Tensei's far greater popularity in Japan. And if you think that's a lot of spin-offs, then you have no idea. The family tree of this series is a large and branching one, the extents of which are beyond the scope of this video. But if you're new to the series, none of that really matters when it comes to SMT V, because this game does a solid job of giving you the information that you need when you need it. There are likely several nods to previous titles littered about, as I've come to expect when I've played through the Persona series, but nothing that would really greatly impact your enjoyment of the game. Shin Megami Tensei V starts off in modern-day Tokyo as the player overhears students talking about a recent string of strange attacks that have been occurring nearby, perpetrated by apparently invisible assailants. One of these incidents sets our protagonist through an alternate route, a tunnel that collapses upon them and a couple of classmates. Our protagonist awakens in what appears to be the sand dunes surrounding the ruins of a deserted, familiar-looking metropolis. Our hero is soon thereafter accosted by demons, but is saved by the flashy arrival of Aogami, who offers a pact: join Aogami and survive. Our hero and Aogami join hands, fusing together and becoming what this game refers to as a Nahobino, a supremely powerful combination whose whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And so, the Nahobino sets off in this strange world in order to hopefully find a way back home and survive the experience. Things go even further off the rails as the Nahobino attempts to navigate through a literal war between angels and demons, which isn't easy in their newfound controversial and, by some accounts, abomination of an existence. As an outsider to the series, it is my opinion that the beat-by-beat story told throughout Shin Megami Tensei V doesn't really stand up to the high praises and accolades bestowed upon its predecessors. There is relatively little dialogue throughout the 120-150 hour journey, and the handful of characters that you do get to converse with in a meaningful way never really connected with me. I don't feel that they were really given enough time to really develop on screen. A lot of the plot points I foresaw literal dozens of hours in advance. Purely from a storytelling perspective, it all felt fairly paint by numbers. Now, Atlus knows how to develop characters and to weave a compelling narrative, and this was clearly not the main focus of Shin Megami Tensei V. Or at least, the story that it attempts to tell is not one that is told through dialogue and complex characters. Shin Megami Tensei V is a lonely story about a protagonist who starts off the game not really fitting into any group in the real world, only to find themselves ostracized even further when finding themselves stranded in the Netherworld. The Netherworld is full of demons looking to tear the Nahobino limb from limb, but with few humans to interact with. So from a certain point of view, the Nahobino is all alone in a wasteland, a sort of worst-case scenario isekai story, But on the other hand, what our Nahobino lacks in human companionship, they more than make up for with their entourage of recruitable demon minions. In fact, there's probably some kind of ironic symbolism going on here that you could probably read into the game if you were so inclined. And while we're talking about the general plot of the game, if you're the kind of player who might get upset about the representations of angels and demons of other religions and quite possibly, or even likely your own, and those representations are not necessarily being the most flattering of light, then this game may not be for you. The Shin Megami Tensei series, so far as I can tell, tells stories around angels and demons of all religions coexisting and competing against one another, in a way not too dissimilar from Neil Gaiman's American Gods, a book I would strongly recommend to anyone fascinated by this concept and would be interested in a deeper dive into this particular brand of irreverent religious fanfiction. While there aren't any compelling party members in SMT V, the supporting cast of Shin Megami Tensei V do a pretty stellar job of holding the game together. Because the protagonist is a silent one, the demon that he fused with, Aogami, communicates telepathically from time to time, prompting questions, driving the story forward. This worked in such a way that I didn't feel the annoyance that sometimes accompanies a silent protagonist. In fact, in a way, the solution overcomes one of the more annoying aspects of speaking protagonists who constantly talk to themselves. This fusion between silent outsider and verbal native to the area provides enough exposition when needed.
Young man, it's still far off, but I sense the presence of a powerful demon.
Oh, hey, you hear that? The demon of the tower sounds like he's on a rampage.
In addition to Aogami, the player also travels alongside Amanazako from time to time, whose bright and cheerful commentary also helps bring the world to life while pointing out potential treasures or death traps in the nearby vicinity. And Gustav of the Cadaver's Hollow may in fact be my favorite character of the entire game, whose golden chains and skeletal figure are a grim symbol of greed and becoming overly attached to worldly possessions, yet whose unabashed enthusiasm for it all is absolutely infectious.
Hey, not bad.
And on that note, hats off once again to the English dub voice actors who nailed each role within the game. Atlas does a phenomenal job of bringing to life each of the characters in the West.
Welcome to the world of shadows, where demons gather.
Though, of course, the Japanese dub is also available for free to download for anyone who prefers those. The real enjoyment of Shin Megami Tensei V comes from how the game plays. People new to Shin Megami Tensei may have heard that it's connected to the Persona series and may be expecting something similar, but the series are very different from one another. And in the case of Shin Megami Tensei V, it feels more closely related to games like Breath of the Wild or Dark Souls than any particular Persona title. While not what I would actually call an open world game, it does come pretty close to feeling that way. The Netherworld is split up into a handful of massive sections that the Nahobino explores on foot, and gradually they find leyline fonts at which to heal, save, and fuse demons and shop. Upon discovering and resting at each font, the Nahobino unlocks the ability to warp to that font, much like the bonfires of Dark Souls. Unlike Dark Souls though, death is pretty heavily punished. Rather than sending you back to one of these fonts, you are instead sent back to the main screen where you can load your last save file. And unfortunately, autosaves aren't a feature of Shin Megami Tensei V, making it extra painful to lose as you're nearing your next save point. Exploring the netherworld of SMT V is incredibly fun though. Similar to Breath of the Wild, this landscape is littered with things to collect, such as consumables and also Memon, which are essentially this game's version of Koroks, the little guys hidden throughout the world in plain sight or tucked away in hard-to-reach areas of the game. Finding more Memon grants you bonuses from Gustav in the game in the form of rare consumable items, or in some cases permanent stat boosting items, which are especially handy in this game. Normally in these reviews I talk about combat first and foremost, but after playing Shin Megami Tensei V, thinking back about my experience, the thing that really kept me coming back was that exploration loop, looking for Memon, collecting items and breaking the icosahedrons for demon essences and finding the glowing apples for massive amounts of glory. And while I may not have 100%ed Shin Megami Tensei V, I definitely collected all of the Maimon, got every floating icosahedron, visited every god statue, completed every side quest, grinded myself up to level 99, and found every justifiable reason of putting off finishing the game in favor of just doing that one more thing. Sorry this review took so long, by the way. That said, combat is also extremely fun and uses what Atlus calls the press turn battle system. It's a little tricky to explain, but feels really good to master once you've got your head wrapped around it. At the beginning of each round, you have 4 turns, one for the Nahobino and one for each of the 3 possible demons in your active party. Regular commands like attacking, using an item, or defending will use one of these 4 turns. However, if your attack scores a critical hit, you gain a bonus turn. Same with if you hit an enemy's weak point with magic, if you swap out demons in your party, or pass on your turn. That means that if you optimize your moves, everyone in your party can actually attack twice per round instead of just once. Conversely though, if you use an element that the enemy is immune to, or miss an attack, or attack a party member due to confusion, you actually forfeit turns, which is pretty brutal. The good news and bad news, though, is that the demons you fight have to abide by the same system for the most part. So if you are able to dodge an enemy attack or bait them into attacking you with an element that you are immune to, you can really gain the upper hand. In essence, the press turn system is all about maximizing your turn economy. An extra feature of Shin Megami Tensei V's combat is the use of Magatsui, essentially a kind of demon energy that accumulates during combat. When your Magatsui gauge is full, you can use a free action to trigger a Magatsui special ability from one of your allies, or you can trigger a Magatsui round of attacks for your entire party, guaranteeing that all attacks for the round that connect will crit, dealing extra damage and, as we just discussed, the extra turns that come from dealing critical hits. The downside, enemies also gather Magatsui, and this extends to boss battles too, so you must keep an eye on this and spend your turns defending to help negate the critical hits. There's a whole lot going on here in the combat system that will take time to wrap your head around, but once you do, it is so much fun. Then again, you may not want to fight every demon that you encounter. Shin Megami Tensei is the original monster trainer game series after all, and you can't persuade demons to join you if they're all dead. So if a demon is below the level of the Nahobino, you will be able to negotiate with the demons to have them join your entourage. These negotiations generally take the form of being presented with 3 options by each demon. Selecting a favorable option from the list 2 or 3 times, providing the items, HP, or MP requested by the demon or money may convince them to join you. But if negotiation is sour, you may end up inadvertently granting the opposing team a free round of attacks. There's seldom any rhyme or reason to these negotiations that I was able to discern. In fact, the phase of the moon even has a huge impact on the moods of these demons, who sometimes will join you straight away, or might just not be willing to listen to you at all during other moon phases. I don't believe Atlus designed the negotiation system in a way that they expected players to be able to negotiate with precision every time, but rather to incorporate an element of randomness into each attempt. Negotiations as a result feels less like a science and more of an art that you just eventually get a feel for. By the end of the game, I was recruiting demons pretty handily, picking the correct responses needed through intuition. Of course, some of the perks that I unlocked through Apotheosis and the World of Shadows may have helped somewhat with that. Apotheosis essentially gives you bonuses that you can unlock by spending the glory you acquire throughout the game to do things like increase the number of demons in your party, the number of skill slots available to the Nahobino or demons, decreasing the amount of money needed when shopping, or granting fail-safes when negotiating with demons to join your party, and other demon fusion bonuses. By the way, if you're looking to get a new demon, one of the things you can do with these demons is actually fuse them together in the World of Shadows, which is extremely satisfying. Prior to playing Shin Megami Tensei V, I had heard rumors about the notorious difficulty of the franchise. In fact, it's pretty often cited as one of the hardest RPG series out there. So I've decided to go ahead and play on hard mode to help make sure that I was getting the full SMT experience. And that's how I played and beat Shin Megami Tensei V. Mostly to see if I could do it, as a personal challenge for myself. Overall, it was a pretty fun experience, but I don't really feel like the difficulty added much to the fun of the experience. Having bragging rights is cool and all, I guess, but I don't really think there's any reason for you to feel pressured into playing on hard mode, or even on normal mode, to be honest. That's the other reason I wanted to play on hard mode, so I could tell you it's honestly not really worth it unless you feel like you've got something to prove. If you're intimidated by the series' reputation, I just wanted to encourage you to play it anyway. Flip it into easy mode if you have to, because there's no shame in it. Just play the game in the way that you enjoy. That's what games are all about after all, right? Musically, Shin Megami Tensei V does not disappoint. The music included is haunting, and I could listen to it for hours and hours. One really cool attention to detail is at the start of combat, the music playing before you choose to attack or speak with the demons you've encountered stays tense and ambient. However, once you've made a decision to attack, the game shifts gears and brings in some really intense battle music. Atlus never disappoints in the music department, and Shin Megami Tensei V is no different. Visually, SMT V is among the best looking games on the Nintendo Switch. It runs at a pretty solid 30 FPS when docked, and there were times when I was playing when I really had to just stop playing for a moment and give the game a real good look around. The way that the world wraps around itself like a paused moment from the movie Inception is particularly striking when you're able to lift your gaze to the sky. Otherwise, the various sections of the Netherworld are gorgeous for what they are, ruins of a desolate metropolis. Demon designs also look pretty familiar overall to those found in the Persona titles, but I can't really fault Atlus for not wanting to really reinvent the wheel every time. I'm not really the hardest person to please in the graphics department. Things like 4K and 60+ FPS gaming aren't nearly as important to me as things like art style and the quality of work, cohesiveness of the designs, and on that front, Shin Megami Tensei is a work of art that runs just fine on the Nintendo Switch, which is great because, at least for the time being, it hasn't been announced for any other platforms.
Shin Megami Tensei V was an incredible entry point into the Shin Megami Tensei series, and it certainly piqued my interest in the rest of SMT, but that'll have to wait for another day. In the meantime, I can say with certainty that Shin Megami Tensei V has solidly and cleanly earned itself a spot in the game collection.